Welcome to the Feminine, Divine, and Sacred Masculine Convergence Room on Peace Weekend. And we have today's session on rediscovering the feminine divine as has been expressed and given to us in Indian antiquity. I have with me two panelists today, Nilesh Oak and Madhu Kishwar, who will be joining us after Nilesh's presentation. And I would just like to briefly introduce Nilesh. Nilesh Oak is an author, researcher, speaker, and corporate consultant. He holds a Bachelor's of Science and a Master's of Science in Chemical Engineering and an Executive MBA. He has published 3 books and writes extensively on ancient Indian history. Nilesh helps Indians become aware of the deep antiquity of Indian civilization so that they truly comprehend present or defend the grand narrative of India. Unlike most other Indian researchers, because he builds it through scientific acumen and logical reasoning. I lost feed. Have I lost feed?
No, we can see you.
Okay.
Yeah.
He is an adjunct faculty at the Institute of Advanced Sciences, Dartmouth, Massachusetts. Is that correct? USA.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So Nilesh, over to you. Please take it away from here.
All right. Namaskar, greetings and love from here in Atlanta, USA to everyone who is watching or will be watching. All right. So what I'm going to do is jump into my PowerPoint presentation. And so let me share the screen. All right, so rediscovering the feminine divine in Indian antiquity. Just yesterday was International Democracy Day, and Dr. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister for Government of India, in his tweet, he said, "For India, democracy is both a cultural heritage and a contemporary choice." And I like that statement of his. And the reason I mention this is because I can essentially copy and refer that to the divine feminine and the sacred masculine. So this ditto can be said for this principle of divine feminine, and the bigger theme is sacred masculine. I deliberately change it to divine masculine. And here is the reason. Sometimes the word sacred is also understood in the sense of something that's something you don't argue with, or something that you don't change, or something that you cannot modify. So that's not what the intended meaning of this divine should be. Divine is something that we are exploring, and there is much more that we have already explored, and there is a much more to be explored. So it's not a subject that has got the end right now. So modifications are necessary. Modifications is a part of it with our changing, evolved understanding. So I prefer to use the term divine feminine, divine masculine, not to belabor on this. Now, it was Galileo Galilei, who told us when he pointed his telescopes towards the sky that, he could see the objects up in the sky are as imperfect or as beautiful as the earth. Okay. And so he said, so essentially he brought up this celestial and terrestrial together. The celestial is equal to terrestrial. It is in last 500 years, at least, it is due to Galileo's pointing the telescope towards the sky. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that we will quickly look at the philosophical aspect, and the experiential aspects of Indian civilization at this divine feminine, divine masculine. But then the next question we should also ask is, does that philosophy percolate into the everyday life, in what we do, how we behave, what is our moral fabric, all right, and does it show, does it exhibit, does it manifest through our actions? And what are those actions? The actions comes in the form of a language, they come in the form of a culture, and they come in the form of identity. Sometimes it's a national identity, a language identity, it could be different identities, we can classify as much as we like. In terms of the soft power, if you want to talk about, in terms of wisdom, how that comes out, the philosophical stage, but also what is actually practiced. And then the protection, which is the resources and whatnot, and the energy. And I'm using this set of 3 words for a reason. You can also think of this in terms of creativity, space, and time. Now, these are all in the positive way. We can also think of this in terms of what is that we want, what is that we desire, which is to say we may not possibly have it at any specific time. And these are 3 Sanskrit words: amati, kshuddha, abhishastu. If we go back to the oldest ancient Indian narrative, or oldest ancient narratives of humanity that has survived and that is with us, that's Rigveda. And I'm going to quote one sukta, richa, from that Rigveda. It goes like this: Tvanno Om Tvanno Asya Amate Rutakshudo Abhishaste Ravasprudi Tvanna Uti Tava Chitraya Diya Shiksha Shachishta Gatuvita. The 3 words there, if you see, amati, kshuddha, and abhishastu. Amati meaning ignorance, exactly the opposite of wisdom. Kshuddha means hunger, and the hunger is, of course, the hunger of a stomach, but hunger of everything, all the basic necessities, that we need to sustain and to protect ourselves. And abhishastu is curse or imbalance, any kind of imbalance. And when that is fixed, then we are in balance, we are healthy, and so on. So you will see these different words. Now, what does all this have to do with the divine feminine or divine masculine? I'm not going to read this Rigveda Sukta. This is, the Rigveda has 10 mandalas. This is from the 10th mandala of Rigveda. And this is a Sukta dedicated to the divine feminine. And you can see the combination of for example, on the left, you are seeing this picture of 3 goddesses there: Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Shakti. And here the word uses a Vagam Bruni. So you see the combination of these 3, their attributes, what is the philosophy, what is the principle, what is the practical, into this particular sukta. Now, why do I mention this? The reason I mention it is sometimes we may think that this could be the divine feminine, like many other places, might be a later evolution. Well, at some point of time in humanity, people realize this principle, but as far as the Indian civilization is concerned, it's very ancient. It goes all the way back to Rigveda. That is my point. So I'm not going to go through the translation of it, but we will look at the picture that you are seeing on the left right here. So if we look at Indian Trimurti, 3 is like 3, like a trinity, okay, 3 murti, 3 forms, 3 principles. These are the principles of creativity, these are the principles of protection, and these are the principles of unification, okay? And so to represent that, what we have here is that Trimurti, the divine feminine, projected to us as a Trimurti: Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Shakti coming together. Now, remember, let's not forget the sacred masculine or the divine masculine. So we have exactly a similar parallel, similar contemporary, similar thing on the masculine side. And that's known as Bhagwan Dattatreya, that is Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh coming together in a Trimurti of a Dattatreya. All right. And again, there is a perfect parallel between that creativity, protection, and unification on both sides. Okay. One more point I need to mention. So, for example, Brahma is responsible or represents creativity. Okay. And Vishnu is the word, the original meaning of the Sanskrit word is for the space, to expand. So that's the space, and in the space that where we live, where we move, and so on. And so we also need a protection, and that protection, that abundance is coming from the Lakshmi. So there is that parallel. So Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, and here you have Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Shakti. And I will briefly talk about their relationship. And then finally, the unification. Many times it's misunderstood the role of Lord Bhagwan Shiva, Rudra, as like a destroyer or the dissolution. Dissolution is an okay word, but destroyer is the wrong word. In fact, it's a unification. It's like sun rising and spreading its rays in the morning. The day goes by, and at the end of the day, when sun sets, as if the sun pulls all the rays back into himself. It's a unification. That's the process of a Shiva. And now there are these parallels that we need. So yesterday I was discussing with my wife, and she mentioned, so think of this in a simple way, that the divine masculine, think of this as a philosophy, and divine feminine is actually one that makes it happen through wisdom, through abundance or wealth, and through health or Shakti or a force or an energy. All right. That's what is needed to fix things, to bring them in balance and make them whole, make them healthy. Okay. The root of health comes from whole, W-H-O-L-E. All right. Now, this combination of these three, I showed you the one sukta from Rigveda. Is it just one place? No, actually Rigveda is filled with this combination of these three divine feminine principles. For example, one place it's mentioned, again, this goes back to the very oldest portion of Rigveda as Ira Saraswati Mahi. All right. Now, a couple more points I want to mention. Now, many times these are misunderstood. These are described simply in a everyday life as these, so for example, Lakshmi is the wife of Vishnu. Now, that's not the correct understanding. They are consorts. They work together in balance. They are supportive of each other to make this thing happen, which is a Purusha and a Prakriti. Okay, they are not wives, they are not spouses of each other, but that's in a common language. Sometimes that's how people speak, but it may get misunderstood. So we talked about the Rigveda, one of the oldest text of humanity. Now the question naturally we should ask is, how deep is Indian antiquity? And that has confused us a lot, okay, because there are many different opinions. So let's talk about what do we know based on scientific research that has occurred over the last many years. For Indians, there are these long cycles of Yuga, and I'll briefly mention this. But something that we can objectively test, even if we look at the objectively testable scientific evidence, that's what the picture that emerges. So what you see on the screen is the time axis. Today is where we are, 21st century. If we go back 2000 years, that's the zero. That's the beginning of the combination CE, BCE. So, and then now we are going backwards. So minus 5K is minus 5000 BCE, minus 10K is minus 10,000 BCE, and so on. Now, this also summarizes my research work of last 30 years. So I'm going to start with the Mahabharata. Now, Mahabharata is one of the two well-known epics of India. Now, what is the context of these epics for the world? The Mahabharata is the longest epic of humanity. Just to give you an idea, if you combine, say, Iliad and Odyssey, the total size, and multiply that by 8 times, then you get some idea of how big Mahabharata is. What I did over the last 25 years now is I looked at all the internal evidence of this Mahabharata text, 125,000 verses long, and extracted initially, specifically all the astronomy descriptions, all the astronomy evidence. It amounts to more than 300. And when I put this together as a jigsaw puzzle, like solving a crossword puzzle in a scientific fashion, of course, testing every single piece of evidence objectively that will stand the scrutiny of any best revolutionary scientific experiment, scientific theory, it leads us to one specific date, and that date is 5561 BCE. That's more than 7,500 years ago. I did the same for the Ramayana, the Valmiki Ramayana. Now, what is the context of Valmiki Ramayana for humanity? It is not as big as Mahabharata, but it is the oldest, even in the Indian context, it is called Adi Kavya. Okay, it's the oldest surviving epic of India, but also oldest surviving epic of humanity. Again, it captures a beautiful historical period of Rama's time, just like Mahabharata also does the same, a beautiful historical period 7,500 years ago. Ramayana does that for more than 14,000 years ago, 12,209 BC. And I used the exactly same method. I went through Valmiki Ramayana, extracted all astronomy observations. They actually amount to close to 600. And again, when I solve them in a fashion of a Rubik's Cube, jigsaw puzzle, crossword puzzle, it leads to a very specific, unique date of 12,209 BCE. That is the year Rama and Ravana Yuddha, the war, took place. And I'll speed up a bit faster for Rigveda. Now in Rigveda, there is astronomy evidence, but at least it did not help me date the Rigveda. But that's when the river Saraswati, which is also, we just heard as a goddess Saraswati, okay, the deification of her, that came to my rescue. And what it shows us is that the Rigveda is not composed over one specific time period, at least the way the Ruchas comes to us, but the oldest portion, the latest portion, the youngest portion of Rigveda are 7,500 years old, same time as Mahabharata. And if you want to know the oldest portion of Rigveda, we have to go definitely for more than 22,000 BC, that is more than 24,000 years. And I'm not saying Rigveda is 24,000 years old. I'm saying it's much older than that. It's definitely older than that, okay? And now I have a wonderful, I do consulting work, and I have a wonderful, I'm a consulting friend in UK, British consultant, with a great sense of humor. He has studied my work. And you know, when he saw this, he said, Nilesh, you need to put a dot there for the timing of European Enlightenment. And the context is important. So that's the timing of European Enlightenment, especially when Europe came in touch with some of the Eastern places, especially India, but also Arabic countries and the China. A lot of knowledge transfer took place. Significant development took place in science in Western Europe. And we are seeing the benefits of it, like Zoom and internet and whatnot, which the science turned into technology. But some of the negatives that also came out, for example, one utterly nonsensical proposition that came is now, Aryan invasion theory. I mean, there is no theory to it, there is no evidence, but that is something that really distorted the true antiquity of Indian civilization. And for Indians, I would say the Yuga theory always existed, but it has multiple definitions. But for some reason, we got stuck with one specific definition, and that has also led to a distortion of the true antiquity of Indian civilization. Sometimes it will claim something very, very old, which refers to, say, the beginning of a universe, but it might be misunderstood as the pragmatic history of our times. All right. So with that, what I want to show you is this is where I started. But then over last 15 years or so, I have found enormous evidence. And just to represent that word enormous, I have put there 1,000 plus. But enormous empirical, objectively testable scientific evidence from dozen plus different disciplines of hard sciences. And that all support, every single piece of new evidence that I find supports the timeline that I said. Now, why is this important? So I'm going to move on now. This is what we are working on. So we don't, as I said, we don't have to stop at 24,000 years. We can actually go back. I'm not going to explain this map. I don't expect you to understand this, but do understand it actually goes back in deep antiquity. Quickly, my books, if you are in India, you can go to subukpublications.com. If you are outside India, on Amazon, these 3 books. And I'm working on this history of Hindu civilization that is follows the path of Saraswati, the antiquity of Saraswati, and so on. All right. Now, why describe this antiquity? Because it gives us the context to understand the development and actual practice of this divine feminine, divine masculine. So I'm going to get into the few illustrations, and with the help of illustrations, let's understand how Indian civilization saw this at the philosophical level, at the experiential level, and a very practical and pragmatic level, actually in a everyday life. How was it practiced? Okay, was this something where we only have the lofty ideas for philosophy, but when it comes to practice, we really can't use it? You will see that that is not the case. There was a perfect balance between what was proposed and what was practiced. Granted, there would be some exceptions, like in any society, they would happen. So let me begin with my illustration number 1. This is a role of a feminine as an administrator, as the highest role, like a royalty, a queen, the administrator for the kingdom. Okay, and I'm taking you to more than 14,000 years ago, to the timing of Ramayana. Those of you who know the story, if not, I would encourage you these days, you can go many sources. Well, if you just type Valmiki Ramayana, you're going to get so many sources. Many people are familiar with the story of Rama, but this prince, young prince, is only 17, 18 years old. And due to many complicated human dynamics, he is now asked to leave his kingdom. Instead of becoming the crown prince, he's ready to become a crown prince. For many complicated series of events, he's been asked to go to the forest and spend 14 years of his life in the forest, when he should be a crown prince and learning the further statecraft and actually dealing with the administration. Now, his wife, so this prince I'm talking is Bhagwan Rama, and his wife is Sita. And so when only Rama has to go per the condition, and so at that time, the royal sage Vasishta suggests to everyone there that, all right, if Rama has to go per these all complicated scenario conditions, that's fine. But Sita, his wife, she doesn't have to go. And so this is what he's saying. I'm just giving you a crude translation in English of the Sanskrit verses. Vasishta is chastising Kaikeyi. This is the wife of Dasharatha, who has forced Rama to go to the forest. And he says, "Oh Kaikeyi, you are devoid of good conduct." But then now he is now suggesting something about Sita, Rama's wife. He says, "Divine Sita did not go to the forest." Okay, Devya Sitaya. That word dew, sky, is from where the Dios word comes, and then therefore divine. Okay, divine Sita need not go to the forest. Remaining here, she should occupy the royal throne of Rama. For even a householder, the Rama and Sita are married, his wife is his Atma. Atma, a crude translation, not a perfect translation, would be soul. Since Sita is the Atma of Rama, she can rule this earth. Now, what is the context? Now, that's not surprising. Yes, we have seen some queens, but here we are talking something happening more than 14,000 years ago. More so, this is offered as a very casual conversation, okay? In fact, no one objected to this specific argument. In reality, what happened is Sita said, "I'm not going to stay if my husband is going to the forest." Because remember that yin and yang, okay? And this balancing principle. So it is Sita's own prerogative. She decides to go with Rama. But in deep antiquity, we see evidence of a group of people or the advisors making a decision to put this lady, again, she's also was 17, 18 years old, somewhere very close to Rama's age, to put on the throne, okay? And let her administer. So that's first instance, okay, of what has been said, that yin and yang, I'm using the Chinese term here, but Purush and Prakriti working together to make it happen. In fact, I just talked about the word consort is the right word. The wives is not the right word. The bharya would be another better word, which is to say someone who supports, Arya and Bhara, which is the weight, somebody, a noble person who supports, okay, in this case the husband, or in this case her partner, okay, in executing the duties, executing dharma. All right, let's go to the illustration 2. Here the emphasis, again, we are going back to the same Ramayana time. The emphasis is on the conduct, the actual actions, okay. So for example, you may see a lot of things, say a lot of things, like in philosophy, but do you practice? Okay, so that's like, the action matters. uh, People can say a lot of things, but do they act? Okay, and then the niti, the moral fabric, and also the freedom of action. Okay, so very lot of wonderful lessons learned into this illustration. Again, goes back to Ramayana times. In fact, it is from Ramayana. It is the historical event of Ahalya and Gautam. Okay, so Ahalya is the lady, Gautam is the sage. They both were married, and Indra is called the in a ordinary language is called the, what you call the god, the king of gods. Okay, a divine being, but the divine being can also, the power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Sometimes, that those things can falling can happen. Now here also, I want to actually emphasize the aspect of factual versus embellish. What has happened is that these original narrations sometimes have got modified when they are told from one generation to another, or in a practical what you call dissemination of this information. Sometimes some wrong information enters, and then they get misinterpreted, and people create all kinds of nonsense out of it. So it's very important to understand factual versus embellished. For example, if you see many paintings in India, or even many arts or statues, you will find this lady sitting there is the Ahalya, and the picture shows she is touching the feet of Bhagwan Ram. Okay, the one standing next to him is his younger brother Lakshman, and this is sage Vishwamitra. Okay, their guru, their spiritual master. Okay, you see these pictures. Now I am saying this is so common, so popular in a Indian psyche, and possibly the world psyche who study Ramayana. But is this really what Valmiki Ramayana is saying? Okay, and the answer is no, it's not what Valmiki Ramayana is saying, but somewhere it got a little bit twisted, misunderstood, and it kind of, flow from there. So what is the real story then? And it's very important that we understand the real story, because when I was young and I was listening to this story, it never made sense to me for many other reasons. I don't have a time to go through the details of the story, and I'll briefly mention it. But when I took to Valmiki Ramayana, the original reading, then it made total sense. So let's see what the factual is. Okay, quickly, those of you who would be watching or are watching, if you want to have a quick, beautiful introduction to Valmiki Ramayana through a visual medium, definitely subscribe to this channel for 21 notes. It's on the YouTube. And in English, but also in Hindi, it is doing a series through all the 7 kanda of Valmiki Ramayana. They have, I think, already completed the Balakanda and Ayodhya Kanda. I'm using some of the figures and pictures from this channel to tell the factual story. Okay, so that's why I just thought I'll mention it. All right, so as the story continues of this Ahalya, I'm going to fast forward and bring you to this point. Ram and Lakshman are traveling with Vishwamitra, and they're going towards Mithila, and on their way, they come to this beautiful ashram, okay? A beautiful place in the forest. And Ram asks, whose ashram is this? Okay, because it's surprisingly empty. It's very peaceful, but there are not many human beings around there. And that's when Vishwamitra tells the story. He says, this is the ashram of a great sage Gautam and his wife Ahalya. Now Vishwamitra is telling the story. He says one time when Gautam had gone, Ahalya's husband had gone somewhere, Indra, the king of gods, and we'll just stick with that, okay? Indra came to their ashram disguised as an ascetic, okay? And he wanted to be intimate with Ahalya. So now here is the trick, okay? This is what I did not hear when I was growing up, and that's what confused me. But what this is interesting. So now the story that is commonly heard is that Ahalya did not recognize Indra, but actually Ahalya did. That's what Valmiki Ramayana says. Ahalya saw through the disguise, but gave her consent to be intimate. Okay, the Sanskrit verse from Valmiki Ramayana, very beautiful. It goes, Muni Vesham Sahasraksham Vidnyaya Raghunandana Matim Chakara Durmeda Deva Raja Kutuvalat. Out of this curiosity for the king of Devas, Ahilya gave her consent. Okay. Now what happened? While they went ahead and became intimate, it so happened that Gautama came back at that time. Indra was scared, he ran away. Now, abhishastu, the word that I use, like a curse, okay, or an imbalance. What this has done, this particular act of infidelity has caused some imbalance, actually a significant imbalance in their relationship of a Gautama and Ahilya. And so he cursed her that she must go through the penance, okay, in isolation in the ashram to fix her mental setup, to purify herself. Okay, it's very, very beautiful. Okay, what is happening here? Okay, so it's recognized, and then she agreed, of course, and she went through a deep tapasya. Okay, and how was this? That is again beautifully described in Valmiki Ramayana. Vata bhaksha nirahara tapyanti bhasmashayini adrushya sarvabhutanam ashramesmi nivasyasi. Essentially, she was alone in that place, which is very well encouraged, described in Bhagavad Gita, in Mahabharata, Ramayana. For example, we say, just live a simple life, take a minimum food and so on. So that's how she did a tapasya for a long time. And now we come back to that from that flashback to the story. Now, this is the story told by Vishwamitra to Ram and Lakshman about this ashram. So with this background, Vishwamitra and the others entered the Ahilya's ashram. And this is very nice how the Ahilya is described by Vishwamitra to Ram and Lakshman. The Sanskrit word, so beautiful, they're described as a Dushtacharini Deva Rupini. Okay, a great lady, a divine feminine, a divine lady who behaved incorrectly for a moment. Okay, very important. So there is no total damnation, there is no total glorification. The attempt is made to see the things as is, okay, what they are, and attempts made to fix those as and when required. And now they actually see Ahilya, who is doing tapasya there. Tapasa dyotitah prabham. How does she shine? She's shining brightly because of her tapasya, okay, because of her penances. And Vishwamitra asked Ram and Lakshman to do this. Actually, they recognized by themselves. And Ram and Lakshman respectfully touched her feet. Raghavo tu tadatasya pado jaggruha turmuda. Okay. So the reason I'm showing this is, remember the embellished story picture I showed you, where it is shown that Ahilya is touching the feet of Rama and Ravana, and Valmiki Ramayana is actually saying the exactly opposite. Sometime in transmission of a story, transmission of a language, sometimes these kind of mistranslations do take place, and they can create a havoc. It totally changes the story 180-degree opposite. Okay, so this is a good example. And then there actually, you can see many paintings. The painting on the right is done by my good friend Dipali Patwotkar from Pune, and this painting on the other side is one I saw, and I took a picture at the World Ramayana conference in January 2020. Okay, so the point here is, though, no eternal damnation, no eternal glorification. We have to earn it. We have to do the right thing to fix the imbalance. Okay, and it doesn't matter whether it is a man or a woman. Okay, divine feminine, divine masculine, it has to be earned, it has to be maintained. Okay, that's what the pragmatic lesson there is. Let's go to illustration 3. Transcending feminine, masculine, and then the varna and ashrama. And now, instead of 14,000 years ago, I'm going to bring you to closer to us. Okay, say more than 7,500 years ago, to the timing of Mahabharata, that 5561 BC that I referred to. Okay, again, just like there is this confusion sometime between feminine, masculine, or at least understood for Indian narrations or the world narrations. Okay, there is this other issue of a varna and ashrama, which are very much part of this divine feminine, divine masculine. We have to understand that dynamics. So the first column I have is the column of a varna. Okay, and most of you listening to this would have heard this: 4 varna: Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. and I have deliberately written Stri, meaning the feminine, the woman, as a separate one there. My point is, in the contemporary sort of a postmodern type of discussion, this particular, the beautiful arrangement, the social arrangement of into Varna of Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, or ashrama, different stages of life, Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyasa, a student life, a family life, a life of retirement, and the final life of meditation, and just giving advice only when people ask. Okay, the renunciation, meditation and renunciation, they are beautifully made to balance our life, to balance the chi, so balance. But it's misunderstood, and that's why I'm quoting few, again, historical events from Mahabharata text, which is more than 7,500 years old. So I have to write in some fashion, so I've written it vertically. It's not to be seen in some kind of a hierarchy. It is not. There is a difference, of course. I mean, Krishna in Bhagavad Gita says, Chatur Varnyam, that Varnya, Maya Srishtam, Guna Karma Vibhagasha. Depending on the individual qualities, individual expertise, and depending on individual liking, that's what we do. Like we ask our children when they're going to university, like, what are you thinking of doing? Some person says, I want to do medicine. Other person says, I want to do engineering. Somebody says laws, and somebody says literature and whatnot. It's not any different. Do you have the ability, and do you have the interest? And it's a great idea to match these with what you actually do. So you have interest something here, but you end up doing something else. And you have to also understand the pros and cons that come with it. Quickly, few stories. So story one, I want to I want to now transcend beyond the feminine and masculine, but also transcend beyond some of the artificial divisions that people have imposed. These are not artificial divisions. These are meant to actually make life easier for everyone. Okay, so in this case, it is a woman who is a acharya, a guru to a Kaushiki Brahmin. Kaushiki is a place. Okay, so a woman is a guru to a Brahmin man, masculine, if you want to do it. And what is her advice? She's saying, I have taught you everything I need to teach you, but now to get the final lesson, you need to go and meet so-and-so person. This is this Vyadha, the butcher. Okay, now if you just take it in a simplistic fashion, it will be considered a Shudra. But you know what is the definition of a Shudra? Paricharyatmakam karma Shudrasyapi swabhavajam. That's what Bhagavad Gita says. But a simple definition I'll give you. It's very easy for us to understand. If you take a salary for what you do, you are a Shudra. As simple as that. So that will qualify 99% of us. Okay, if we get a quick remuneration in the form of a salary for what we do, we are a Shudra. So professor, everyone, doctors, if you're on the salary payroll, you are a Shudra. So it's not seen in the way it is being projected. Okay, so now Vada is actually doing his whatever he knows, getting the animals, cutting the meat, cleaning it nicely, and serving the society with whatever he knows. A Kaushiki Brahman is sent to this Vada, and Kaushiki Brahman is surprised. He says, okay, what am I going to learn? He goes to Vada and says, hey, my guru, my acharya sent me to you. Please give me the advice. And Vada says, I don't have advice. Then this Brahmin asks, so tell me what you do. And he says, well, this is what I do. I bring it, I clean it very nicely, and I serve the society. So the lesson here is that no work, no action is beneath you. Okay, one should not define the hierarchy based on the actions they do. Okay, so something that naturally comes to you does not add any negative influence to you. So you should do it. Okay, quickly another one. I'll go a bit fast through that. My time is up here. Another situation, a Brahman is sent to a Vaishya, a businessman, for advice. And the businessman says, well, when I'm weighing something, the old weighing balance, I make sure I hold it in balance. Okay, a balanced attitude. Doesn't mind if I'm weighing a potatoes or a cabbage or cauliflower, I always weigh it properly, okay, in balance. And if you want to see another complex dynamic, so Vyasa is, a son of a sage and a fisherwoman. Okay, now his son is a celibate right from the beginning, and he is sent to Janaka, who is a householder and a military man for advice. So Shuka is going to Janaka for advice, okay? And I will speed up fast, and I'm saying that same Janaka or a similar Janaka, another Janaka in a similar position, is sent to another celibate and renunciate lady named Sulabha for advice. So you see, there is no hierarchy. These things you can find people from all different professions getting advice from each other, okay, as and when required. Okay, and that's the beautiful balancing between this feminine and masculine. Okay, quickly, two more illustrations, and I'll go very fast through this. So transcending feminine, masculine in intellectual and philosophical discussions. So now people will say, well, but that's 7,500 years ago, 14,000 years ago. What about now? Well, I'm going to take you, say, more than 1,000 years ago, still not very recent, and I'll bring you to recent with the last one. What you are seeing here is on the left side, you are seeing a person named, a very knowledgeable person, Mandana Mishra. Okay, we are talking of more than 1,500 years ago. And here is the Adi Shankara, who gave, who really pulled the Hinduism from, at one point, as I said, the Prakriti, Vikruti, and Sanskriti. Prakriti is something natural, Sanskriti is the evolution, but sometimes it can degrade, sometimes, or it can go down. It may have the low points, may not be a degradation, but low points. And the people are so focused on the activity, and that's how you do it. So what you're seeing here, I'm simplifying this very crudely. There are Shad Darshanas, six experiential techniques in the Indian civilization. And so this person here, Mandana Mishra, was the proponent of something called Purva Mimamsa, okay, through Yajna, okay, through Yajna activity, getting the highest good. And Shankara is the proponent of Uttara Mimamsa, the philosophical. So action versus knowledge. And in reality, we know we need both, okay? So it is a debate between these two. And as Shankara, this Adi Shankara was going around India and convincing others, not through violence, convincing, that's the Indian tradition, through Vada, through logical, scientific discussion. What is interesting is, when they come together and they agree to a debate, and the question now is who would be the judge? I mean, they need a judge, arbitrator, or mediator. And Shankara selects Mandana Mishra's wife, Ubhaya Bharati, as the judge. He said, let her be the judge. And the debate goes on for many days. And what is interesting is that, not surprising though, but what is interesting is that she declares, she also has that divine feminine in her, the balanced attitude, samyak jnana. Just because Mandana Mishra is her husband, she's not saying he's the winner. She actually declares Adi Shankara here as the winner. Okay, that's something happening 1,000 years ago. And that brings me to the last one. The illustration that's bringing us to our times, okay? So I'm going to go for 500 years and bring it right to today. Transcending feminine and masculine. Again, if you think in terms of chivalry, now usually the chivalry would be translated, at least understood in a subtle fashion. Bravery, courtesy, honor, yeah, true. But in most cases, it is exhibited by a masculine towards feminine, okay? Or a man towards a woman, okay? Now, if we have to transcend this, guys, we can't be just expecting chivalry only from a man towards a woman, okay? This has to be seen both ways. Now, that is the Indian philosophical point of view. The Purush and Prakriti, no difference. They're at the same level, working together to balance the creation, to protect the creation, and finally to unify the creation. But do we see that in practice? I mean, are both genders jumping up to execute their roles? And I want to show you with bit of a bias on the feminine side because of the title of my topic. This is going back to say 500, 600 years ago, Rani Durgavati. There were numerous attacks, okay, the foreign attacks, incursions of a very offensive Islam on India. And this is in the central India. And she fought not just as a ruler and administrator, literally in the field, on the horse, she fought, and she defeated a very powerful force 3 times. On the 4th time, another force with additional ammunition, when they came back, when she became injured, and instead of falling into the enemy hands, and she knew, she had heard these horror stories and what would happen to her if she fell into those hands. So then she did a balidan, okay? She killed herself because she was injured and she knew that she would not no longer able to fight, okay? Very powerful story in Jabalpur, if you go in central India, in Madhya Pradesh. Beautiful story, beautiful museum, beautiful fort, okay? This is not, we are not talking deep antiquity, we are talking only 500 years ago. Most of the people would know. If not, you must go and check whatever you need to check, Wikipedia, whatnot. Rani Lakshmibai, again, we are talking what, less than 200 years ago, okay? With a son, you know, tied to her back, she actually jumped into a real fight, okay? And actually got killed during the fight. A very brave lady. There are many movies made on her, but this is something worth listening to. Not just her fighting skills, but her administrative abilities, her statecraft abilities, a wonderful example of that. Okay, there are many, many more. Ahilyabai Holkar, you know, she was another great administrator in the central India. Tarabai actually changed the history, okay? She single-handedly made the Maratha forces in the central India fight against the Aurangzeb, okay? That's called 27-year war, okay? That saved Indian civilization, okay? From sometime like a 1680 to 1707, 27-year war, the lady in the middle, okay? Tarabai. In the left with the Mahatma Gandhi, if you see Sarojini Naidu, okay, working in the social sphere, okay, to fight against the colonial oppression, okay, so very successfully. And on the right side, if you see Anandi Gopal Joshi here, you know, this is maybe 150 years ago or so approximately, in USA, okay, these three were the first Western medicine doctors for each of their country, the woman doctors of Western medicine for each of their countries. This one possibly from Turkey, I think, or Iran. This one is Korea or Japan, and this Anandi Gopal Joshi becoming a medical doctor more than 150 years ago, and becoming, you know, and bringing that Western medicine to India. Okay. Now, Indian medicine, the Ayurveda, there were many other doctors, both male and female. All right, quickly coming to contemporary times, and I'm done. If you look at again the divine feminine, you know, there is famous Indira Gandhi with President Nixon there, Jayalalitha. See, I have picked few faces, okay, and most of them, actually, all of them here are into political sphere, okay. Now, whether a man or a woman, but what happens in a statecraft, you'll be forced to make some decisions, and you will get both praise, but you also get criticism. But the point is, do you try your best to take the principle, the philosophy, and try your best to stay true to it? Okay. The lady here, you know, this one here is Sita Raman. You know, she has been India's finance. I mean, right now she's a finance minister, I think, but she had been a defense minister. That's where she's sitting into this fighter lane, you know, right there. And so some wonderful woman here is the late Sushma Swaraj with John Kerry. Okay, she was a external affairs minister, and so on. And my last slide now. Okay, quickly, what can happen is this: the power corrupts, and I don't mean only in the political power, but as a journalism, as many areas. Again, not to specifically point these people, but these people are in the news. Many people who know it, you know. So the caution. As I said before, so divine feminine, divine masculine, it's not given, it's not granted. Someone has to earn it, someone has to keep it. And power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so a word of caution, but also listen, is that do not trust 100% of what they say. By they, I mean people, okay? Both male and female working in public sphere. Trust 50% of what they do. And this is a very important point of Indian civilization, of Sanatan Vedic Dharma, which is to say, it's one thing to have a lofty philosophy, but do you practice it? And how do you know somebody's practicing it? Is the word acharya. The acharya is a teacher, guru. It means to someone who not only says something, but actually practices in his or her own life. So therefore I say trust 50% of what they do for ordinary folks that we see in a public social sphere. Okay, don't trust 100% of what they say. And actually, is it possible to be in a social sphere and still practice this divine feminine, divine masculine? Absolutely. Okay, this one, what you see at the top there is that chivalry there. Okay, the whole 100% female crew of Air India, flying from Delhi to San Francisco and Delhi to New York. Actually, 52 flights, routes they fly, exclusive female crew. Everyone is a female. What you see here is combat pilots, okay, ladies there in the Indian Air Force. They are the current ones, but this is not a new tradition. They were there 20 years ago in the Kargil war. There were lady combat fighters, okay. And some of the faces that some of you may recognize this, okay. These are celibates, and same is with our India's Prime Minister Modi. Just these three individuals, they have no family. They have renounced their family. And you'd say, okay, well, some people say, what is this renunciate? Why is he an administrator? Well, there cannot be a better administrator than someone who has renounced everything and is doing for the right principle. Okay. All right. So quickly bring you back the Indian Trimurti of the creativity, protection, unification. We see this as metaphorically speaking into these three: Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Shakti. Shakti, the energy, the force. We see the balance here, on the masculine side with Dattatreya, or the Trimurti of Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. And the word consort, again, I will emphasize. Please remove that from your vocabulary. They are not husband and wife. They are consorts. They are working together in harmony, in partnership, in association, and in balance to achieve this divine presence, to recognize that rediscovering is referring to, it's already there. Okay, just like America was there. When Columbus discovered for Western Europe because they did not know it. But America had a multi-million population of people, and they knew it existed. It's there. We have to always recognize it, okay, and earn it and maintain it. Okay, so that's my last slide. With that, Malini ji, I'm going to stop sharing, and let's see what we need to do next.
Well,
and Madhu Kishwar ji is here. I see her.
Yes, she's been waiting a while.
Oh, my apologies, Madhu ji, if I kept you waiting. You are on the mute. Madhu ji, you are on the mute.
Nilesh ji, that was empowering and powerful, and and I'm really grateful for you to have brought up the concept of the equality being practiced and showcasing for us. In fact, a lot of it was educative for me, and I'm sure a lot of people watching, the antiquity and the relevance of the feminine divine in statecraft and in administration. It isn't an esoteric concept that people just talked and thought about, but something that was actually brought into practical daily life and existence. And thank you so much for that presentation. And we have with us Madhu Kishwar, a celebrated author and researcher. And before I hand over to you, I'd just like to read a brief bio. She was a senior fellow at the Center of Studies of Developmental Societies, and one minute, let me just get this going, I'm sorry, and Director of Indic Studies project at the CSDS till 2016. She is currently the Maulana Azad National Professor of the Indian Council for Social Science Research. Her life work represents a combination of academic scholarship, research-based social and legal activism, including public interest litigation and investigative journalism on issues concerning the most neglected strata of society, as well as blasting the negative stereotype of Indian society. Madhu's work has been areas to include and not confined to law, liberty and livelihoods, aimed at evolving a pro-poor agenda of economic reforms in India, gender justice while avoiding the Zanana Dabba approach to women's issues, a people-centric study of diverse cultures and faith traditions in the Indic universities, and socially sensitive approach to strengthening human rights in India and bridging divides rather than promoting class caste wars in the name of social justice. She is known for her legal aid and PIL work on behalf of vulnerable groups. So, Madhu, I hand this over to you. Take it away from here. You need to unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Unmute. Am I audible now? Namaste
Yes,
to everybody.
yes, you are audible.
You've already covered a lot of ground with Nilesh ji. So I don't know if I'll be repeating some since I could not of that lecture. If I am repeating, in that case, please.
Madhuji, you're frozen. Is your connection? We can't hear you, Madhuji. Nilesh, would you be able to spotlight her? I think she's having some technical problem. Okay, I think she needs to go back and join back in. Right, great. Yes, we have you back live, but your audio, you're muted. Yeah, right, great.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, before I start, I'd like to clarify, I'm not a Maulana of ICSSR. I'm a national professor of Indian Council. I've been awarded national professorship by the Indian Council of Social Science Research. My internet connection, I'm told, is going to be unstable because I am in this remote village near Haridwar, which doesn't have very good connectivity. So if things go haywire, well, you have no choice but to put up with it. So as I mentioned at the outset, I'm going to talk about the living and ever expanding tradition of goddess worship in India. Am I audible?
Yes.
Can you please confirm? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. One essential tenet of Hinduism, pre-Vedic, Vedic and post-Vedic, is that Shakti, the feminine energy, is believed to represent primeval creative principle underlying the cosmos. She is the energizing force of all divinity, of every being and everything. Shakti is known by the generic name Devi, derived from the Sanskrit word Div, meaning to shine. Our great epics, the Vedas, as well as Puranic literature, give a whole array of names and attributes to the universal feminine power, and the various goddesses take on distinct iconographic forms. For example, Sri Lakshmi, will you open the... I'm going to do screen share. Please enable screen share. I have a PPT.
Yeah, 1 minute.
A small PPT, which I rustled together in haste since I'm far away from my home and office.
I made you post.
Yeah, good. Go
Yes.
to more.
Okay.
Perfect.
Can you screen share now? Is that the right way, Nilesh? Have I done the right thing?
Yes, you've done it. Madhuji, you should able to share the screen now.
Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Okay.
Go into, yeah, great. Okay.
So Sri Lakshmi is celebrated as the goddess of wealth and prosperity, Ma Saraswati as the presiding deity of the arts and knowledge, Usha, the goddess of dawn, is the dispeller of ignorance, Durga is the vanquisher of evil, Earth itself is worshipped as the goddess Prithvi, and hence in the last century, Bharat Bhumi, the land mass that constitutes India, has come to be worshipped as Ma Bharati. More of that little later. It is significant that the knowledge aspect of the Devi is represented by a Shakti cluster of 10 goddesses known as Dasa Mahavidyas, or the 10 great transcendental wisdoms that encompass the entire universe of knowledge. Since the cosmic energy is feminine, almost every devata or the male deity gets diminished without his Shakti. The male gods are incomplete, even powerless, without a consort, barring rare exceptions like Dattatreya, who remains single. But Shakti is complete in herself because her existence does not depend on any extraneous power. In fact, the goddesses become even more powerful in their non-consort avatars. I will talk greater length on this later, but just to give you quick examples. For example, Ma Parvati is the consort of Lord Shiva. Radha is Krishna's beloved. Ma Sita is the wife of Rama, a loved, worshipped and revered. But it's the non-consort goddesses like Chandi, Durga, Kali, and a whole range of their regional versions who are both revered and feared. None dare invoke their wrath. No male deity is as feared as are the non-consort avatar of Devis. When the energies of Devatas prove inadequate, they have to turn to Devi for protection. For example, the great goddess Durga, who was born from the energies of Devatas when they suffered crushing defeats in the long drawn-out battle with the Asuras, she's worshipped as the vanquisher of evil. Her battle represents a universal war between knowledge and ignorance, truth and falsehood, oppressor and the oppressed. But she also promises that as Shakambari, she would nourish the world in times of need with the vegetation grown from her body, and that in a terrible form, she would deliver her worshippers from their enemies. She needs no male to legitimize her power, nor is she dependent on the need to conciliate any male divinity. I'm not suggesting that there's any conflict, male-female conflict at all. It is not gender wars scenario, but just to emphasize that the female deities are far more powerful than even male deities in the Hindu tradition. The all-powerful feminine force assumes diverse forms, taking on different avatars to fulfill varied purposes at different times. In a Mahakali or Chandiru, she is terrifying, uncontrollable, and has the power to destroy the whole universe. In a Parvati avatar, she is the unconditionally nurturing mother. In a Sita avatar, she is an ideal daughter, ideal wife, daughter-in-law, and a compassionate, forgiving mother. In a Radha avatar, she appears as a besotted lover of Krishna. And Radha, though she is not wedded to Krishna, has pride of place by Krishna's side in every temple, in every Hindu temple in India. In all prayers, her name comes before Krishna as also that of Sita before Ram, Jai Siya Ram. That's how people, it's a popular greeting. Sita's name comes before. So also Radha's name before Krishna. Another special feature of Hindu Sanatana Dharma is that there's no sharp divide between the divine and the human. Various gods and goddesses take avatar and descend on earth to appear sometimes in the form of ordinary mortals in intimate familiar relationships and often in new divine incarnations. Even though goddess worship is a living and thriving tradition in India from the time of Harappan culture, which is dated as being 5,000 to 10,000 years old, there's no definite date yet. It could even be older. We don't know yet. Much more work needs to be done to date the Hindu civilization. Now, some ancient goddesses have continued to hold sway, while others have lost their preeminence, even though goddess worship per se is a continuing tradition in India. There are also instances of new goddesses taking avatar. Here are three among many examples of such new incarnations. One, Bharat Mata or Mother India. She acquired preeminence during the freedom movement from colonial rule to represent enslaved Mother India, calling out to her sons to free her from colonial bondage. As mentioned earlier, Ma Bharati is in a way an extension of Ma Prithvi, the Mother Earth. The sacredness attached to Ma Bharati is evident from the fact that Hindus refer to India as Punya Bhumi, that is sacred land. It is no exaggeration to say that today, commitment to Ma Bharati or Mother India is treated as the sure short litmus test of being a patriotic Indian, no matter what religion a person follows. You can go against the Constitution of India, challenge it, want it revised, but any disrespect shown to Mother India is something people are not very comfortable with. You may or may not worship any of the traditional Hindu deities. You can even be an atheist, but loyalty to Mother India is increasingly treated as a non-negotiable. And Vande Mataram, that is, Hail Mother, or salute to the Mother, is the slogan which was popularized by a Bengali writer of the freedom movement who wrote a beautiful poem with that name. Now, second recent avatar is Santoshi Ma. She gained popular currency thanks to a Bollywood film released in the early 1970s. The film was titled Jai Santoshi Ma, which is Hail Santoshi Mother. And Santoshi, the word Santosh, refers to contentment. She combines some of the qualities of non-consort goddesses with those of benign consort goddesses. The Shakti form of goddesses come to the aid of human beings and gods in periods of cosmic darkness by killing the demons that threaten the cosmic order. But Santoshi Ma, being a modern goddess, did not establish herself or did not need to establish herself by annihilating any particular demon. Instead, her miraculous powers come to the rescue of her devotees who are being harassed and tyrannized by fellow human beings. She's particularly popular among women, especially married women, who observe fasts on Fridays as symbolic penance in order to achieve their desired goals and get the desired boons from her. So she's a boon-giving, contentment-giving goddess. The third, more recent arrival is our very own Devi Swachnarayani, a new goddess who took avatar to come to our aid when we at Manushi, the women's rights organization that I founded long years ago, when we were facing murderous attacks on account of our work for law and policy reform for street vendors and trying to protect them from extortionist mafias. In most parts of the modern world, street hawkers are the most harassed and tyrannized sections among the self-employed poor. Local governments and the police in most countries treat them as illegal encroachers on public land, even though they provide much needed services for the urban population. This is how Ma Swachnarayani came into being. While battling with the government to protect the livelihood rights of street hawkers who are fleeced mercilessly by the combined might of the police, municipal officials and politicians, corrupt politicians, on account of their illegal status, that is, hawkers almost everywhere, are not given proper licenses to trade, and trading without license is treated as an illegal activity. The world over, it's true in New York, it's true in Moscow, it's true in Spain. I saw it in London, this cat and mouse game that the police play with the hawkers. Now, while we were battling, we found that to get them legal status, to get them their livelihood rights protected by the government through due process of law, we found that the chaos and squalor created by vendors in India creates deep prejudice against them in the minds of even those who use their services. Therefore, to drive home the message that cleaning one's physical environment is as sacred a duty of every citizen as is cleansing our system of governance of corruption and abuse of power, from August 2001, we began the practice of worshipping the humble broom with all the rituals that go with worshipping regular deities. And that's one of the most uplifting things about India. You know, if I choose to treat the humble broom as my sacred deity, nobody dare tell me, no, how dare you do that? You're supposed to worship X, Y, and Z. I can pick and choose my iconography, my own avatar or the form of goddess that I wish, and give her the attributes that I think my goddess needs to have in order to assist us in battling the demons of today. So when we began worshipping the humble broom with all the rituals that go with worshipping regular deities, the idea was to emphasize that this task should not be looked down upon with disdain and handed over to lowly paid sweepers who are treated, as lower class of people for performing this vital service for society. Slowly, our broom deity acquired many more attributes that are required in the contemporary world to battle corruption, tyranny of the government machinery, and to establish just norms for protection of vulnerable groups in society. And I'm not talking only about India. I think this is true. My description of the ways in which governments function, I think, is globally relevant. So the broom deity slowly acquired many more attributes and came to represent a creative amalgam of the traditional female trinity, the pan-India trinity, Durga, Lakshmi, and Saraswati, with many new attributes and powers required to meet contemporary challenges. Let me describe the powers and attributes of our 10-armed Swachhnaraini, with each hand carrying a unique weapon. First, of course, the cleaning broom, which symbolizes our respect for cleanliness of the physical environment, as well as our resolve to cleanse the government machinery of corruption. The broom also represents the strength that comes from unity. Each stick that constitutes the broom is by itself weak and can be easily broken into pieces. Alone, it is of no value. However, when the same sticks are tied together for a common purpose, they cannot be broken except by pulling them apart. This gave the message that vendors have a chance of winning their battle only if they stay united against the demonic forces exploiting and tyrannizing them. The second hand, you see, she carries a mini clock to emphasize the need to change with changing times and dismantle all the archaic colonial restrictions and laws that are still prevalent in India and act as an instrument of exploitation and tyranny. The third hand carries a coin in hand held in Abhay Mudra, Abhay meaning be fearless. It's placed in the palm of the goddess, the coin, held in Abhay Mudra to communicate the message that citizens have a right to earn a dignified livelihood without fear, harassment, and extortion. Then the next hand has a weighing balance, symbolizing commitment to social justice and careful weighing of truth and untruth, as well as honest evaluation of issues and ground reality. The video camera in one of our hands reminds us that, and our policymakers, that our laws need to take careful account of ground reality. A large part of the success of our campaign for policy and law reform for street vendors, incidentally, I drafted the new All India legislation for the Government of India, and with some amendments, it became law in 2014. A large part of the success of our campaign for policy and law reform for street vendors was due to our recording on videotape the human rights violations of vendors and using the documentary films we made on their problems as a tool of campaigning and lobbying. And that's why our goddess always has a camera in hand. That's our big weapon. Diya, or an earthen lamp, symbolizes dispelling of darkness and bringing hope for the poor and vulnerable. A calculator in one hand to remind us to keep honest accounts of all our financial dealings and demand similar financial accountability and transparency from the government. Then she also holds a pen, which is a symbol, the kalam is a symbol of Ma Saraswati, symbol of wisdom and learning, as well as a reminder that the pen is mightier than any sword. Conch shell symbolizes purity as well as a clarion call for self-opposition of citizens so that they can become active players in democratizing governance. Then there's the 10th hand has a stalk of barley to symbolize multiplication of wealth as well as the spread of the message. Just as one seed can produce an unlimited number of grains, so also this modest initiative became the harbinger for many more endeavors to strengthen the rights of citizens. Finally, the lotus flower on which the goddess stands, just as Lakshmi, goddess Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, stands on a lotus flower, conveys the need to create beauty and prosperity by enabling people to move out of squalor and poverty. While the foremost symbol of Swachanarayani is the broom representing her creative energy to cleanse wrongdoing, she's as much the goddess of self-discipline or Atma Sayam, the power of the individual as a member of a group to create order and withstand. Goddess की picture लिया जो last में है, जो पहले में थी सबसे में. Yeah, just keep that on. To create order and withstand chaos. Now, I mentioned this earlier in passing, that there are two distinct manifestations of Hindu goddesses. The benign consort goddesses like Ma Parvati, Ma Sita, Ma Lakshmi. These are all revered but not feared. The other kind of goddesses are non-consort goddesses. They're far more numerous and culturally more powerful. Each region, often each village in India, worships its own local version of the Chandi Durga type of deity. Such goddesses have some common features. Frequently, the story of their origin is derived from that of a woman, an ordinary woman, who transformed herself into a ferocious being in order to defend herself, her village, or a community from wrongdoers. The all-pervasive religious folklore has thus made available to the women of India certain powerful ways of living on their own terms. This includes the socially and culturally sanctioned right to assume the Durga Chandi Roop to defend not only herself from wrong, but also society at large. Hindu Devis and Devatas are not distant heavenly figures, not sitting up there in the clouds, but are a living presence in most people's lives. Even though they issue no commandments nor expect blind allegiance, unlike the Abrahamic gods, they don't get offended if you choose to ignore them. And that's, I think, one of the most charming aspects of Hindu Sanatana Dharma. You can ignore God, you can quarrel with your Devis and Devtas. In fact, even Bollywood films have a lot of these rebellious dialogues with, especially with Devi avatars, whether it's Ma Durga or some other. Whenever something goes wrong, the hero or the heroine will come and complain and actually quarrel, saying, how can you do this to me when I've been doing all the, so you can also disown them if you like, and they're not going to punish you, be vengeful, whatever. In Sanatan Dharma, the divine dwells within each human being as well as in every sentient and non-sentient being. And each human being has it in him or her to rise to the status of divine, to become Sita-like or Saraswati Rupi. One comes across mini Durgas and Sakshat Saraswatis all over the country. One constantly meets living incarnations of the divine in everyday life. And I'm saying now because I'm saying that, but they're treated in their own community, in their own village, in their own biradri, in that manner. I have come across countless such women who are given the same kind of reverence that you would to the divine form that you worship in a temple. It is very common, for example, for a dutiful son to be praised as Ram incarnate, or a talented daughter to be commended as a virtual Saraswati. I have often heard a happy and satisfied mother-in-law refer to her daughter-in-law as the coming of Lakshmi incarnate into her home. Frequently, their worldly behavior likes are genuinely lovable and inspiring in the way they live up to their chosen commitments. You don't have to do grand things necessarily, but in the limited context, if you incorporate all the qualities that are associated with Ma Saraswati or Ma Durga, well, then you get the kind of respect that people reserve for our Devis. A fearless woman who battles wrongdoings in society more often than not gets to be treated as Durga incarnate. And women who manifest Durga-like qualities command special respect and deference, at least certainly within their kinship group, even if they are unknown in the larger public domain. I remember that as a child, whenever someone tried to bully me to do something I didn't want to, my mother would warn the others, those bullies, saying, don't you provoke her into manifesting her Durga Chandi Roop. She can't be bullied into submission, so keep off. Thus, very early on, my relatives understood, and others around me, that it was best to be careful about stepping on my toes. Even before I became a Durga devotee, I unconsciously began to, I'm being a little facetious, play Durga with remarkable success in dealing with a whole range of situations, from sexual harassment to intervening between two groups of riotous men, to bringing under control neighborhood drunkards and wife beaters. For instance, if I heard sounds of a woman being beaten and crying in my neighborhood at night, even if it was late past midnight, I would barge into that house all alone and get the man to realize that beating his wife was simply not acceptable. There were times when the concerned men were drunk, but I invariably succeeded in stopping the violence. On one occasion, I remember, in freezing cold night of December, I made the drunkard husband stand underneath a cold shower to bring down his temper. On each such occasion, the next day, the man would come and apologize instead of holding it against me. And that is also because most people respond to domestic violence by calling the police. I would never do that, and I would not allow my neighbors to do that also, because once the police comes, the whole thing gets complicated, and the next morning, the woman herself, she doesn't want the father of her children in jail, because that brings a different kind of a stigma. So very often women would themselves beg the police to cancel the case. And I realized that neighborhood watch is far more effective a way of dealing with domestic violence than bringing in the police, taking the woman to court. That will take hundreds of years, and the court case will drag on with uncertain results. And it's not easy for children, especially women with children, to deal with a situation where the father of their children is in jail. And so it's much better that you discipline the man than to hand him over to a police, which usually only know how to brutalize people further. Now, this is not at all to claim that I have any divine power, but only to illustrate that whenever a woman displays courage for a righteous cause, our society accepts the authority with grace, provided one acts without malice and as a well-wisher, not as a hostile outsider. And my well-wishing was evident from the fact that I was now willing to call the police and hand the man over to them. So they felt protected by my intervention instead of feeling threatened. Thus, every village in India has its Gram Devi or Devata, the village Devi or male or female
I think we lost the link, or
Yeah,
she's still
well,
there.
she's there, but we've lost her audio link. Well, Madhu, that was an absolutely powerful presentation and a powerful explanation and description of how the divine feminine is manifested and uh, revered in modern times. And I'm so grateful to you for sharing with us the presence of Mata Swachanarayani, who seems to be the immediate urgent need of the day, where we need to clean up, come together, clean up our systems, come together as people. The broom, I love your explanation and description of the broom being woven together to act as one. And in this powerful event, in this powerful week of the Peace
May I
Week.
continue or hello?
Oh, we thought we had lost you for good.
No, I'm here. If you let me finish, I'll do it
Yeah,
in 5 minutes.
please. Let me just say one thing that I'm so grateful for your sharing the goddess Swachanarayani, who is especially the concept of the broom, which is so important for today's day and age, where people need to come together, because without humanity coming together, establishing peace on earth is not going to happen. And we need to use that broom to clean up the systems that are causing the disharmony, causing the wars, causing the pain, and causing the disruption. So
Okay.
we
Thank
welcome
you.
Swachanarayani into this event with absolute reverence and gratitude. So go ahead and
I'll
finish.
also at the end play a few parts of the Arati, the song of Devi Swachanarayani at the end. But may I continue?
Yeah, please, Madhu, please.
Okay. So I was saying every village in India has its Gram Devi or Devata. The Gram Devatas are usually connected with extreme piety, but all the legends surrounding Gram Devis tell us of ordinary women who felt outraged by the acts of some adharmi, some evildoer who caused harm to society. Their response to such desecration is to rise in terrible fury and thereby grow in stature so that they're able to span both heaven and earth. In each case, they either destroyed the devilish persona or punished him appropriately. Their power of destruction, born out of righteous rage, terrorizes everybody into submission. But once their rage has achieved its purpose, and when the devotees are ready to propitiate the Devi, these Devis can be relied upon for protection as well as healing and showering bounties. Theirs are myths of ascent from human to divine, rather than of descent from divine to the human. Any woman who manifests extraordinary strength and who is believed to be her own mistress, totally unafraid of men, begins to be treated with special awe and reverence, and often commands unconditional obedience in a social circle, including from men, as did, for example, Indira Gandhi, who was celebrated as a virtual Durga for a time period, for a brief time period of her life. She began to lose her hold on levers of power only after she turned dictatorial and suspended civil liberties and jailed all her key opponents by declaring an emergency. Most importantly, she lost her aura when it became clear that her main priority was to hand over power to her sons, even at the cost of national interest, and that she had become dependent on her younger son Sanjay, who was beginning to call the shots in politics and governance. So the moment people realize she's not the strong and almighty Durga, that she is actually dependent on this rather mediocre son and a rather whimsical son of hers, she wasn't treated the same way, and also because she turned dictatorial. People expected her to be Mother India. Instead, she became the mother of only her own sons. And that's when she lost her glory and was even shunted out of power rather unceremoniously. Not just high-powered women, and this is the most noteworthy thing, as I mentioned before, not just high-powered women like Indira Gandhi, women of even humbler origins have this choice to be treated as virtual Devis, as virtual Durgas, as Saraswatis. And this continuing tradition of worshipping not just the divine in temples, the feminine divine in temples for ritual worship, but this belief that that divine exists within every woman, that every woman is Shakti incarnate. It's for her to realize that Shakti, that Shakti doesn't lie just in the temples and the image of the goddess in the temple, but it lies within each woman, each girl child. And that's why there are elaborate rituals for worshipping girl children during Navratras, for example. Little girls are treated as Devis incarnate, and the birth of a daughter often celebrated as the coming of Lakshmi into the house. That when the daughter-in-law comes into the house, she soaks her feet in before entering the house in turmeric paste and enters, and those foot marks are treated as symbols of coming of Lakshmi, and many families actually preserve those for generations to come. So this tradition creates especially the worship of non-consort goddesses, creates a unique kind of social space in our otherwise marriage-obsessed culture for women who wish to opt out of matrimony altogether. This has also made voluntary celibacy a very respected choice for women. In many modern cultures, especially those influenced by crackpot Freudian theories, sexual abstinence is seen as an unhealthy aberration that is supposed to lead to all kinds of neurosis and a disoriented personality. In India, however, we are still heavily inclined towards the opposite tradition that holds that voluntary sexual abstinence, not enforced, voluntary sexual abstinence bestows extraordinary powers on human beings, including women, not just men, but many of the most revered women in Indian dharmic history, as well as in modern history, the freedom movement, the social reform movements of 19th century, they opted out of sexual relations altogether. And many walked out of marriages or refused to get married. they've been treated as virtual goddesses, so much so that the gods come to fear them and are compelled to do their bidding. That's part of uh, legends surrounding such women, and of which we have plenty. We are fortunate that men in India are habituated to fearing and respecting strong female figures, unlike in the West, where strong women, it's taken a lot of ideological drubbing to make men accept strong women, but otherwise they still are locked in that mindset which says Eve was made out of Adam's rib, and so she's a temptress. She is the cause of man's downfall, and all the rest of it. Since men in India are habituated to fearing and respecting strong female figures, it's noteworthy that the very same man who thinks nothing of beating his wife or daughter has no psychological barrier to bowing in reverence and fear before a Ma Durga, whether one in temple or in real life. A strong woman can treat men like little kids. And maybe that's why I learned to act as the elder sister. I call it the Didi Amma advantage, or the motherly figure. And I would address men, sometimes even older to me, as Raja Bhaiya, dear brother, or Raja Beta, darling son, so to establish the power equation very clearly. Because the moment you address them in that manner, you're making it clear, you expect and you deserve respect, and you're certainly not a sexual object to be played with. So that, I think, as a strategy, at least has worked for, not just for me, I know many women who have
We have lost your audio, Madhu. We seem to have lost your feed. You are signed in, but we've lost your audio. Yes, we have. Okay. Okay, we have you back, but your
Are you
audio.
back?
Yeah.
You're back. Just half a minute to give you a glimpse of the Arti, the song of Ma Swach Narayani. Would you like to hear it for
Yeah,
just
please.
we are singing with street vendors.
Yeah. Could you explain to the audience exactly what an Aarti is and why it is done?
Yeah. Yeah. The symbols.
I've lost your audio. Oh, we can't hear you, Madhuji. Madhuji, you're totally mute, inaudible. We've lost your feed.
जय जय स्वच्छ नारायणी, जय जय स्वच्छ नारायणी, जय जय स्वच्छ नारायणी, जय जय स्वच्छ नारायणी, जन जन की सुखदायिनी, जन जन की सुखदायिनी, जन जन की सुखदायिनी, जन जन की सुखदायिनी, एक हाथ में झाड़ू रखती भ्रष्टाचार कुमारिनी, एक हाथ में झाड़ू रखती भ्रष्टाचार कुमारिनी, आई है तो जुल्म मिटाएगी, ये तो नया ज़माना लाएगी, ये तो नया ज़माना लाएगी। सीख सीख में शक्ति बढ़ती, एक सीख कुछ नहीं कर सकती, सीख सीख में शक्ति बढ़ती, एक सीख कुछ नहीं कर सकती, हो एकजुट हो में सिखाती माता होती तारी, आई है तो जुल्म मिटाएगी, ये तो नया ज़माना लाएगी, ये तो नया ज़माना लाएगी। एक हाथ में ये कैमरा, इसमें सबका कर्म है भरा, एक हाथ में ये कैमरा, इसमें सबका कर्म है भरा, अफसर नौकर कोई न छूटे, सबका रखती लेखा जोखा, अफसर नौकर कोई न छूटे, सबका रखती लेखा जोखा, यथा योग्य फलदायिनी माँ, यथा योग्य फलदायिनी, यथा योग्य फलदायिनी माँ, यथा योग्य फलदायिनी, आई है तो जुल्म मिटाएगी, ये तो नया ज़माना लाएगी, ये तो नया
Can't hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
I
Can't
have
hear.
just sent you. I didn't complete it thinking many are not understanding. But what I have done is I have sent you the Arati in Hindi and English along with the posters. So if you wish to post it for those who would like to follow it up or are interested, can do so. And I'll conclude with this. So, any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Madhuji, the best thing is you email me the link and I will attach it with the description into the video channel when we put it in so that people can access the Arati. But actually, this is really wonderful because it...
I have done so already.
Have you put it in the chat? No. You've emailed it to me.
No, I emailed it.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. I will take it up from there and merge it into the description of the video when we upload it so that people have access to it. This has been actually an absolutely brilliant and wonderful session, Madhuji. And you have showcased so beautifully that the feminine divine is actually evolving and adaptable and emerges with the needs of the time to serve the needs of the time. And it isn't necessarily stuck in the fixed narratives, which sometimes may not be relevant for what is required for us on planet Earth. So, so for our viewers, thank you for joining us on this amazing session where we've had to absolutely wonderfully brilliant and educative. At least I leave the session today much better informed and much more in knowing of the aspects and various concepts of divinity that need to be embraced in today's day and age. So with that, thank you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you in our continuing events till the 21st of September, which is United Nations Peace Day. So.